God of everlasting and steadfast love, we gather this morning from our various locations with our varying concerns, needs, strengths, gifts, experiences. We come rejoicing that you are a God of love for all people, no matter who we are and no matter what we do. You envelop us with amazing, deep love. We quiet our hearts and our minds to be present in the moment with each other and you, that we may feel the love, know the love, and share the love in both words and acts. We seek to be inspired and empowered by the Spirit to be reflections of your great love, working for justice where there are injustices, peace where there is war, healing where there is hurt, giving voice to the voiceless, finding power for the powerless. May we seek to have eyes to see and ears to hear the needs and concerns of all creation. We give thanks for all the ways we have experienced your wondrous good love. In the name of Jesus, who modeled a life of love. Amen. And now to Jacob for the community reading.
Therefore the Lord appointed 72 idols. He sent them ahead of him, 2 by 2, to every town and place where he was about to come.
The 72 came back full of happiness.
They were saying, Teacher, even the demons submit to us in your name.
Your name.
But Jesus said to them, I was watching Satan fall out of heaven, yet you are given you the authority to step on snakes and scorpions and on orders and power of the enemy. Nothing ever got too hard to you.
Thank you, Jesus. Still,
Don't be happy that the Spirit submits you. Be happy that your names are
written down in heaven.
Right then Jesus began to celebrate in the Holy Spirit, and he said, I want to honor you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you hidden these things from wise and understanding people and revealed them to little children.
yes, Father.
Father, because that's just how you wanted it
to be.
Everything had become given to me by my Father. No one really knows who the Son is except the Father, and no one knows who the Father is except the Son, and the person the Son wants to reveal himself, and Jesus turned to his closest firewood probably as a young eyed blessed to see when they're singing.
Because I'm telling you, lots of prophets
and kings wanted to see the things and they didn't get to. They also wanted to hear the things you're hearing and didn't get to.
Thank you, and now Mr. Chris for announcements.
Thank you, Jacob. Good morning, everybody. It's April 30th, and welcome to the beloved community. All right. Today's theme, our very own changemaker Matt Lowe, and he is going to show us a holy way of dealing with conflict. This could be very useful. All right, and please don't feel bad if you can't contribute like you want. Michael's putting links for contributions and a sign-up link for the mailing list in chat. Checks are also welcome. I like it. They got a little check right there. Okay, and then our guest speaker on May 7th will be State Senator Monique Limon. This would be a good time to introduce your friends to our church. So yeah, spread the word. Hey, and it doesn't have to be that. You spread the word anytime you want to bring friends to our church. You know what? The more, the merrier. All right. Each Wednesday, 7 p.m. Same link as this one. Caroline keeps us on our toes. I like that. It makes me a little bit taller. Okay. So we'll share communion afterwards. And feel free to use whatever you have on hand for bread and wine. And then today's quote from Desmond Tutu. Forgiving and being reconciled to our enemies or our loved ones are not about pretending that things are other than they are. It's not about patting one another on the back and turning a blind eye to the wrong. True reconciliation exposes the awfulness, the abuse, the hurt, the truth. It could even sometimes make things worse. It is a risky undertaking, but in the end, it is worthwhile because in the end, only an honest confrontation with reality can bring real healing. Superficial reconciliation can bring only superficial healing. All right. And now, oh yeah, right there. If you'd like to be on the mailing list, you see that email right there? You go ahead and send it, and then you'll get on our mailing list. And I believe now what we're going to have is like a 3 to 4 minute meet and greet. Feel free to brighten somebody's day.
Yeah, feel free to brighten somebody's day. That's why we're here. We're here to support, encourage, comfort, and heal one another. And so your smile, your words might be all that someone needs.
Hello.
Is my video on?
Yes.
My video on and audio sound okay?
Yes.
Thank you.
Hi, Diane. I love your hair. I accidentally left my breakout room. Oops.
Uh-oh. Well, it's good to hear your voice and welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
Ooh.
Welcome back, everybody. And I need you to turn yours off. Well, Matt Lowe, what can I say? He has been a precious friend and collaborator in pursuing truth and compassion and justice, thinking through things, exchanging books. Matt says, and I quote, "I have been through difficult things in my life, but it is my goal to live a life not defined by those circumstances. I have had systems work against me. I have experienced trauma at the hands of loved ones, and I have had moments where I have not been the person I was proud to be. I have built a life dedicated to liberation and healing from these wounds. I have made grief my friend, and I have figured out how to find my power so that the abuses of power do not take my agency. I am not perfect. I show up and do my work as I continue to build upon a legacy of healing, a legacy of world change, and a legacy of generational impact." So that's Matt in his own words. And everybody, would you just go ahead and enjoy Matt Lowe these next few minutes?
Thank you, Pastor Dang. You went to the deep cuts. You found some old stuff. Appreciate that. Can I ask you or somebody to read a passage for today? Luke 10:17 through 24, please. Somebody could pull that up. If anybody does it, just say ready or pop on.
Well, here we go.
Thank you.
Oh, these are the verses we just read.
Oh, I didn't hear that. Sorry, I didn't hear them.
All right. Yeah, we just read that.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Well, wonderful. I hope everybody remembers those passages. We're going to be going in on those today, recognizing the themes of people. Don't be excited by people that are obedient to what you say, because remember, you are in heaven. And the ideas of being childlike, and so what children listen, children speak up, children say it, children voice what they need. And so and then what it means to feel affirmed in love. So we're going to hit those. Before we do that, I want to recognize the passing and transitioning of Harry Belafonte, an icon, somebody that had a platform of being a musician and an actor, and still spoke out and hosted many civil rights leaders of his time, and then to his later days even was a part of unjust incarceration and decisions of wrongfully convicted people, like the Angola 3 and the Central Park 5. So, and really supported the Innocence Project. So I want to shout out that icon and make sure his legacy lives on. Another one that I want to, it's not really a person, but I want to give recognition. I don't think we do this enough here, to the call and response tradition. It's going to be a part of the sermon today, so I'm kind of moving into that. But when we do our community reading, what we are doing is we are engaging in a centuries old tradition coming from West Africa called call and response. not sure if anybody knew that. It stems from West Africa, passed on, brought over here, and it's been transformed and used in many different traditions, from blues to jazz to hip hop, to preaching to gospel choir to all, so, and when we the call and response, when you're at church and you hear somebody say, "Come on, pastor," that's a call and response. When you hear somebody say, "Yes, let's go," "Yeah, that's right, hallelujah," that's the call and response, because it's the Spirit responding to what is happening. And one of those phrases is called "Say it right." Say it right, pastor. Well, we're going to use that Spirit today. We're going to say it right. Saying it right is we're affirming the pastor. Just say it, because the Spirit is moving. Love is with that pastor. Love is moving. Love is guiding us to a collective experience, a collective liberation. And love is allowing what needs to be said to be said. And so that's what we're here to do today. Hopefully with some joy, getting through some hard things. We believe we can do hard things. And as we do that, we're gonna talk a little bit about conflict, because we got love surrounding us today. So in this conversation of conflict, there's we're gonna touch on some tough areas, but there's in conflict dialogues, this we often jump right to the abuse. We want to jump to the most explicit harm, so we want to make the point. And so we often use the situations of abuse that have already taken place. And I'm not just meaning physical abuse, domestic violence, those are very explicit examples, but we can be meaning white supremacy. We can be talking about sexual assault. We can be talking about colonization, the very explicit how systems of abuse work. But this passage today lets us know we are walking in love as we are walking with Jesus, and that children, the innocence of the children, help us, guide us in a way of embracing conflict, because children say it. Children say what they need. Children name their terms. They're like, "I want it now," for better or worse. And so we need to talk about something, because when children act and do these kind of things of speaking up and saying it right and naming their terms, what parents even have this term. It's called acting up. And so if you remember back in months ago, the last passage I taught for him was actually from this previous passage in this chapter of Luke 10. It was Luke 1 through 18. And so we're kind of picking up right where I left off. And if you remember, that sermon I gave was called Disability Discipleship. So I'm still walking in that disability discipleship tradition. And we're talking about a phrase called act up. Acting up is something that was used as a way of putting somebody down. Acting up, I just did a quick Google search in preparation of this and how it has been used historically, or just kind of definitions of it. It means acting unruly, or it could be feeling silence, so something, the body responding in some way, and it also means an antisocial action, like somebody that's just acting antisocially, and it's something that just it's an anger, it's a frustration, it's a rage response. And so keep that in mind when we're talking about acting up, because when we're acting up, there's something that's being said. And acting up, it actually comes from a historical perspective that I learned about from the AIDS movement in the 80s, actually. And so it has a deep connection with the disability movement, because the disability movement, goes back, back to eugenics in the late 1880s. And the reason that people that were categorized in the categorization of eugenics at that time period were under the categories of deaf, dumb, and mute. And if somebody was acting up and not following in the social norms, then they were put in those categories. And so we're doing a little historical education, but we're going to bring it front and center real quick. We need to have the context of genocide here, because right now we are in the midst. There's a social media graphic that was going around for a little while. I was familiar with it, but it was interesting that it was going around. It's called the 10 stages of genocide. And for trans lives right now, people that are experiencing the exclusion, discrimination, and alienation, isolation right now who are trans, they say we're in about stage 7 or 8. That's pretty far in out of 10 stages. So we need to have that in our perspective and how we are addressing conflict. And so this is we're addressing conflict before it becomes abuse here. So because we are to be the light in the world, we're you know, even the rocks cry out. And so we are saying that, hey, there's a humanity we need to affirm in one another, so that way we can be light and love in this world. The acting out has a historical connection also with the call and response tradition. So as I mentioned, call and response comes from West Africa, and was in America. It was transitioned into something, came ring shout, and then had other music forms attached to it. But it was, if you remember the old spirituals from the slavery period, and the songs that they would sing, like "Wade in the Water," those were similar, coming from the call and response tradition. And what those did is those were countercultural. They were rebellious. They were rebelling against something. They were acting up. And even in church, you were not allowed to dance. In church in that time, it was very, you know, sterile, very like straight up, don't move, no stepping. So when people were singing, you couldn't do anything. And oftentimes people that were enslaved would get reprimanded for like moving in church, whether it was a sway or just like a little step. And so and they would call that acting up, you know. And so it has a deep tradition in being rebellious. And in that, we need to recognize our connection with what we are engaging in when we are engaging in call and response. There's a purpose for it. And so we're here today acknowledging the connection with disability, with our Black ancestors that have passed, with people in the AIDS movement in the 80s, 90s, and currently, trans lives that are currently being fought for, and those fighting for our not gun rights, but fighting for the rights of lives, fighting for the rights of children, and fighting for protection, because that guns so easily take our lives because of instability and difference. And so we're going to get into conflict now with all that said, and talk about how conflict before abuse, but how it is informed by disability. As people with disabilities, we are familiar with exclusion, with shunning, with being pushed out, you know, being forcefully removed, you know, as Ruth Wilson Gilmore calls it. She calls it organized abandonment. And so when we talk about a form of conflict, the way we often do it is, if this person doesn't agree with us, then they're out, you know. We just kind of walk away. And what, you know, somebody's like victimizing us, and or somebody says something bad to us, and be like, I'm not taking this, and we walk away, you know. And you know, I want us to be able to say, think twice. There's actually a whole organization I found that was called Think Twice, because when we engage conflict, we need to think twice of, like, by walking away, we are actually participating in shunning. This author, Sarah Schulman, who wrote the book Conflict is Not Abuse, says that we need to name our terms, and we need to say it right. You know, so we need to say it. We need to say it right. We need to name our terms. They need to know what it is we want and the timeline in which we need it to happen. And so we can step away. That is okay. Distance is great. But when we experience, and this is not violence, so this is conflict, and oftentimes we've equated conflict with violence. And so if somebody says something to us, how we equate that to violence, and we need understanding. That's why it's so important. You hear somebody so much of people like, oh, we need to have dialogue. If we can only find understanding, and that's That's true. We need to affirm that we need to have understanding, but oftentimes the people that are calling for understanding are those that are in the positions of power. And so what happens is the person that is being put down is the one that feels like they need to come back and do the emotional work to then explain it to the person that's putting them down. But what we need to do is be like, hey, I think there was a misunderstanding here before it becomes violent. And so if we don't understand something, ask. And if we still don't understand, then continue asking. And so being people that have that hold questions, that move with curiosity. And in this process, there's something that happens when we come to it with curiosity. The fear subsides. I'll say, because oftentimes when we come into conflict, we get really nervous. We just like, oh, I can't do this, or like there's an emotional trigger that happens within us of fight or flight, or some say there's another third one called fawn, which is just kind of like a freeze, and that could be self-defeating in some ways, because what it does is it shuts us down. But we've been taught to shut down by the system, by the shame system, by the death system, by the exclusionary system. Instead, we have the love of Jesus. We can say it, we can say it right. We can name our terms. And so when we come to conflict, we need to know we are surrounded by love. Love carries us. Love is what has us here. And what is inside of us needs to come out. We cannot put our hand on our mouth. Like we need to say what we are about. And in that process, we will say it, and we will say it right. Spirit is moving with us and in us all the time, not just here at church, not just in singing, but not just in preaching, but God is with us. And so when we move, it's not just moving and giving somebody an extra, $5 to get some food. It's moving in conflict. Spirit is still there with us in conflict. And so as we're going through conflict, this is difficult, because we have to have the consciousness. We need to have the self-awareness of like, oh, I'm having a response right now. I'm feeling some type of way. And this is informing the way that I'm responding right now in this particular situation. In the passage, it talks about the idea of do not become excited because your enemies are obedient to what you say. So just because, but instead be excited that you are seen as in heaven already. And so know that you are wrapped in love already. Don't become excited by your foe or somebody that you have an argument with, or that sees a different point of view. Don't, because they listen to you. That's not what the goal is. The goal is not to listen to you. In fact, Paulo Freire, he says, you can move from one fundamentalism to another fundamentalism, and it's rooted in the same fatalistic outcomes. And the same thing goes for this conflict. If we just create somebody else as the other, oh, they're just over there. They're the other. They're the ones with the conservative point of view. They're the ones, say this and say that and do this and do that. Well, it's going to end in the same fundamentalistic outcome, because it has the same, what Paulo Freire calls fatalism, meaning the same idea of perfection, or right versus wrong thinking, or I'm better, you're like good versus bad. It's a protective mechanism in humanity that helps us get through our fight or flight. It helps us categorize people. It's good, but it's harmful to society. It's momentarily good, but it has a long-term harm, because it creates an objective outcome, and objective outcomes can be exploited. And so what Paulo Freire says, we need to press into the subjective, into the lived experience. We need to be people that ask the questions. The subjective in the way of teaching is just asking kids, oh, what's that like for you? What system do you think informs that? Oh, where'd you get that idea from? That's what Paulo Freire teaches his students to do, as he tells them to ask the questions. And so when we're engaging and seeking understanding, ask the questions. But if there's something that you need to say it, and say it right, because they need to know the terms. They need to know that you are walking in love. They need to know that this is what it means to walk in love. And by you siding with love and speaking with justice and speaking with truth and the righteous siding of humanity, then we will maintain our humanity, because the Spirit will reveal what the Spirit needs to reveal, right? So we are here walking in love in conflict. There's silencing no more, shunning no more, exclusion no more, forced pushing out no more, organized abandonment no more. We got to say it, and we got to say it right. Name our terms. Name our terms. We got to prevent the othering that takes place. There's this othering is happening by shunning. If we go to a conflict, and I'm guilty of this, I'm not coming up here saying like, oh, I've got all conflict down. I still go through my emotional regulations, my nervous system, you know, it's a whole thing when we're in the midst of it. But as we move through, we got to name our terms. So for example, if somebody comes up and upsets me, be like, hey, I really don't like, or I'm feeling really upset by what you said, and I really don't like that. I don't really like that perspective that you have towards this other person, and I think it's really hurtful to what you said about that person. But I'm going to step away right now, and I'm going to come back to you in an hour, and I'm going to check in with you and make sure and check in and see if you reflected on what you said. So what happens here is we're naming the way we feel, we're naming what happened, we're naming what we would like, and we're naming what the action is that we're going to come back to. And so we're saying it, and we're saying it right. And this can be taught in nonviolent communication. Some people have heard of it as the I message. We teach it in the Alternatives to Violence project that I'm a part of. So it's a part of restorative communication. We need to be people that embrace conflict. I think the church I know the church kind of has a downside in our society right now. Like, we don't really look highly upon the church, but the church can reclaim its place in society if the church steps into its place of repair and justice. Meaning, yes, repair and justice, meaning truth and reconciliation, but also a healing center. If the church truly stepped into its spirit, we can be the healing center in our communities. We can be the place of like, hey, this is how we move through conflict. The Spirit and Jesus shows us the path of restoration. It's all there for us. And so we recognize that, and we say, hey, we want to be people that move in this conflict because we are walking in love. We are walking in love. There's some truth that we need to know. I know there's already been some truth that's been dropped here, but there's oftentimes we still create a other by looking at the ways in which we move through conflict as the supremacist is the only one that moves in this othering way. The supremacist is the only one that moves in the othering way, and that is wrong. The supremacist and the person that is not victimized but has the victim perspective can often do the same shunning, can do the same exclusionary actions, meaning that somebody with a victim mentality can shun somebody away because the shame is already there for them. They don't feel they have the voice to communicate. Whereas the supremacists will shun because they don't want to engage, they don't want to expand. They are invested in the investing in shunning, investing in othering. And so they move in the same way. And we need to root ourselves in love, because then it's a very simplistic form. If we root ourselves in love, then the victim goes away. But that's a lot of work. That's a big jump. But that's the future we got to see. Desmond Tutu says there's no future without forgiveness, and so we got to walk in that. We got to walk in that way of forgiving ourselves, so that way we can be in relationship with others. They say that forgiveness is for you, reconciliation is for the other person, and so we walk in that spirit for positive change. It's always possible. It's always possible. There's for the hope of Jesus has been poured out upon us. There's no shame walking in Jesus. What we're here doing today is we're believing in a hope that fewer people will be dehumanized. I'm walking into the tradition of disability discipleship, advocating for humanization of people, because I believe that's what Jesus is doing in this passage. He's saying, he wants you to say it. He wants you to say it right. He wants you to name your terms. He wants you to know that you are in heaven, that your enemies, these people that have dehumanized, do not have the right way. And by you, by them listening to you, doesn't mean that you have the right way either. And what has us be the right way is being like children. And children, they say it, and they say it right. They name their terms. They believe they have love surrounding them already. And so we hear the children, and we hear when children get upset, there's something that happens. There's something that a children has a hard time being calmed down. And we need to know that we are the child. What often gets a child through being upset is affirming them, affirming that they are in love, that they are supported, that the parent is here, that they are going to be taken care of, that there's a tenderness that they can come jump into the arms of and be reminded that they are the beloved. That's the child's need. But oftentimes our society doesn't meet that. Oftentimes our society continues to push and push and push until people get pushed down and isolated, abandoned, excluded so much that it comes out and they act out. They can only do what the body is internally doing. It could be not even conscious, but it is something within the body. As Martin Luther King said, the riot is the voice of the unheard. And we often heard poison or resentment is the poison that you wish somebody else would drink. But I say freedom is the fruit of forgiveness. And so for us to walk in that forgiveness is the way to continue to be like the child, to continue to be like, love is surrounding me. Love is something I can continue to walk in. I can say my terms. I can say it and say what I need, and I can say it right. And the child wants the parents. The child wants to be in love, wants to continue to walk in love. And the passage continues to go on and talks about how it is so special. Jesus says to his disciples that it's so special that these truths. For the people that have been excluded, or the people that walk in the othering and in the self-righteousness, do not know these ways. The people that can see and that can hear do not know these ways. Also, a little nod to disability discipleship right there in Jesus's words, because it's actually the people that cannot hear and cannot see know the way. And we hear that, and we affirm that if we create a victim, if we create a other, then we are not walking in love. But instead, if we walk in understanding, we ask questions, we press into the subjective, we know we are embracing the humanity. And if we continue to eliminate the man, our fellow man in humanity, then all we have left is hue. There's no manity in humanity. And so we're missing half the puzzle. And so we got to remind ourselves of our full humanity, of each person on this planet, no matter if we disagree with them. I gotta say, there was a quote that pastor said a few weeks ago: activism is our rent for being on earth. And I have one that's similar to that. It is our moral obligation as humans on this earth to engage conflict, because it is our way of embracing difference with one another, to not punish, to not shun, to continue to engage and to have fun with one another, to be curious and to experience joy, to say, hey, I see you. And if somebody's acting up and acting a fool, then say, hey, think twice. And remind yourself to think twice also. And if you come up to a situation where you're pressed, I want you to say it, and I want you to say it right. Make sure they know why you are leaving, why you are walking away, and why you believe what you believe. And say it with love. I believe that love is surrounding you. I believe that love is with you. So don't hold back your words. Your agency is within you. Your love is within you. Your power is within you. God is with you. We are with you. And I want to say as a solution, because I know this is really scary to engage conflict this way. This author, Sarah Schulman, said there's actually a solution. She did 4 case studies of people from like New Age movements to church movements to trans liberation to the AIDS epidemic to conflict in Gaza, and she noticed that there was 2 similarities that brought about this conflict in a good way, and she called it delay and community accountability, meaning that if somebody's in the conflict and you delay, say, hey, I'm going to come back to you in an hour, you're saying, oh, and that's the delay. And then you go surround yourself with an accountable community. You share what is going on with you. You come to the people in truth, so that way they can walk with you in it. They can be a voice that sees things from the outside perspective and ask you questions that gets you to think. We need to be open about our shortcomings or our conflicts with each other, so that way we can be an accountable community. But delay is okay. Delay is what allows you to listen to the Spirit, because in the moment our emotions come up and we get flooded, you know. And so
So
get
Matt,
excited here, because
Matt,
Yep.
Before we run out of time, I want to make sure we get a chance to
Oh, yeah.
explore where you went deep like a wide receiver wanting a touchdown, and I want to first thank you for centering our transgender neighbors who are really living in a state of emergency in this country. And as you were talking, I was wondering actually how, as it seems you're suggesting, you're aiming for like the dismantling of silos. It sounds like that's what you're saying, for us to not be stuck in our silos of separation. And I'm wondering how that feels and looks for the person who has said it right, at least to the best of their understanding. What they're going to do. Tell us how you see that.
Whew, that's a good question. That actually speaks to a situation I'm in currently in my life. Trusting that God is with you, that you've said what you need to say, and continue to surround yourself with accountable community. Process it with them. Delays are okay. A delay doesn't have to be just 1 hour like I named it. It could be 3 weeks. It could be 3 years. It could be however long it needs to be. Because if the person is unwilling to, if they're just going to continue to perpetuate the harm and to not come to you in recognizing your humanity, your lived experience in the situation, then that's just going to continue to create harm. And so, and that will continue to turn into a more harmful, abusive cycle or situation. And so your environment is very important. So that's why we say it, and we say it in love. They need to know. And then, I don't mean it in a very brash way. You're saying it, you engage them in questions, and you engage them in their full humanity. But yeah, it could take a break. Engaging conflict is intimidating for the other person too, especially when we do it in a way of acknowledging their humanity.
So, some years ago, when we had a different president who took action against trans people in the military, I remember posting online from using that famous quote from Pastor Martin Niemöller during World War II. And I just wrote, first they came for the transgender people. And I think that it's important for us to realize that this is all of us. This, what's happening to trans people is actually happening to people. And that it's a power move of fascism that's happening. And so in some way, I'm trying to feel out what you're going for here. We're wrapped up in love. We are living in heaven right now. So in this place of security and perfect love, we can say it right. We can speak out. Are you telling us that we need to be advocates, not just for our trans neighbors, but we just need to be advocates, period? And we need to know how to do that. Is that where you're going?
Yeah, we need to be advocates of how to engage conflict, because if we are allies, we need to be the ones engaging the conflict. We need to be making ourselves uncomfortable. We need to be the ones
Ah,
engaging the other people, because the people that have the lived experience of being oppressed, they're the ones that are in the abusive cycle. So that's not their job to continue to speak
ah,
truth. Well, it is their job. Well, not their job, but
yeah.
they will continue to speak truth in which they are able. So as people that are just in conflict, that just see things differently, we need to be the people that are walking in love and addressing the conflict,
Yeah.
because it's not abusive to us. And so um, in the person talks about fascism in this book and calls fascism a neurosis, meaning that is it's an illness of the mind, meaning and went on to later say that it's a way of it's just an othering that has been reinforced in the brain so much that they just don't see the world. They see the world in a particular way, and the way that through psychological processing breaks that down is through these questioning exercises and engaging another human and expanding their perspective of humanity.
So I think now now it's starting to break through, the lights breaking through in terms of I when it comes to saying it right, when it comes to speaking up, when it comes to doing it collectively, as in call and response, uplifting one another, we are uplifting one another together.
Yeah.
We're doing this because we're empowering one another to say what needs to be said, which means you have to be part of a community some way, somehow, or communities that help you achieve that, help you live out who you are trying to be in the world, so that you'll have the courage to speak up, to act up, if you will. It sounds like you're saying that it's harder to be an actor upper
Yeah.
if you're alone, if you're not in, if you don't have the support. So the thing is it also sounds like you're saying, like you're trying to give us permission to not only do that and be that. You're trying to get us to give more permission to each other, to embolden and empower one another. Am I collecting that from you properly?
Yeah, because all of us are allies in one way or another. Like I'm an ally with you in addressing racial justice. You're an ally with me in addressing ableism, and so you can go speak in ways to people that I can't because of my lived experience, and I can go speak to people in other ways. And you and I actively do this with each other, and because of our lived experience and the harm that takes place in each of those spaces. So, so we need to be the people that embrace conflict. It's a beautiful thing, and we, as the spirit is within us, so and we walk in love, and love is with us, and go embrace conflict.
All right, Matt. So we're going to open the floor, but let me just say, I appreciate you bringing this again, and and your centering of the state of emergency of trans folks, and then also the things that are happening with disabled folks and Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. I'm bringing that to the fore. I think that's beautiful. Or anybody who's facing any kind of domination and abuse. But you kind of went like over our heads, I think, a bit. You just kind of you were stating profundities where we just need you to say it right, Matt. just spit it out. And so now we're capturing it, I think. Is anybody else grasping what we're looking at here? Yes, I see a couple of hands. Julia and Clint, take it away.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to share, and I want to share my interpretation of what I just heard. And I want like a check from Matt to see if I'm following. I'll share that the reason I was gone for the past couple of weeks was that I went down to the East Coast to be with my baby girl, who decided that she wants to transition into my baby boy.
Yeah.
And the procedure that was done was a double mastectomy. And I can tell you from the perspective of her parent, who raised a little girl. And I raised them with so much love and open-mindedness that I said, you know, if they decide they want to be gay or they want to run away and join the circus, like I'm always gonna love my kids.
Yeah.
But when I tell you, when she told me that she wanted to transition, I wasn't expecting that. When I tell you it came out of left field, and I was like, whoa, now I didn't know how to even process that. And here I am trying so hard to be the most open-minded and loving mother that I could possibly be. And now I've learned, kind of like just what Matt said, I need to ask those questions. I can't just sit around and, you know, I want to accept her, him wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
But there's questions that I don't know, you know, like sometimes he'll want to dress more feminine and I don't understand that. So it's like, baby, you need to explain that to me because I want to understand. I want to understand what you're going through, but I don't get it. So I think that's what I got from your talk, that, you know, if I can come at it with compassion and say, look, I don't understand and I want to understand.
Yeah.
So help me out with this.
Yeah.
Then we can, you know, it's conflict in the most wonderful way, you know, to say we just have two different views and I just don't get it. Please help me out. And I feel like the only reason that I can do that is because this is my child, you know. So of course I'm going to come at it with tremendous compassion. But when we're talking about strangers, you know, it's so easy to pass judgment, so easy to, you know, because we don't understand, you know, we don't understand. And I am humble enough to admit that I don't know how to handle it, and I'm trying my best to handle it.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Thank you for coming to community and saying that. There's an echo. I want to acknowledge that transitions are hard for them, and I think it's a beautiful and courageous thing that they are doing, and I think it is a step in that you are showing that you are not shunning or excluding, that you went and joined them, and I think that is beautiful. And however hard it is, I also want to name that there is a grief for parents that goes unnamed, and there's groups and support groups for parents trying to be supportive through transitions. So I would like seek those out. I know there's people in our community here in Santa Barbara that there's one called PFLAG, which is I forget what the acronym is, but it's parents and supporting
Parents for lesbian and gays, which they don't really use that anymore. They just go by PFLAG. They don't.
Yeah. And so it's there's support networks, and reach out to community or if anybody else has resources that they can share in the chat.
Yeah, let me just say this, Matt. During just before and during quarantine 3 years ago, and they're not on today, but this is what Ruth and Kaylon went through, and their child changed their name, and so it was probably the most difficult thing as parents that they've gone through in their lives. And yet they were like you. They have been supportive of their child all along. And, I mean, I know their children, and spent time with them when this transition was early. I think just letting them know that there's a space, there's a place in people's lives for them, and that's all your child is looking for, is what you gave. Is, you have a permanent space right here in my heart. That's what you're saying. You have a permanent space in my heart, and that's what any of us wants in life. That when we're not understood, when we're not heard or whatever, to know that this space is not going to move. And Michael's hand was up too.
Yeah, I'm going to try to be concise. I was following every word that you were saying, Matt, and I was struggling. David kind of put it into context that maybe I wasn't going as deep, or maybe I was going deeper than you were even leading deeply, but I was seeing some juxtapositions in things you were recommending us or telling us, and I was struggling with this whole thing of exclusion. And 10 years ago, most people know this, but 10 years ago, Linnea and I, we chose to walk away from a congregation. We engaged for over a year in formal debates and the denominational process, and we tried to obstruct it, and we tried to reason with it. And ultimately, our denomination, or our part of the denomination, they dominated it. We came to a vote, and our church chose to exclude gay people. So we had to leave. There's right and there's wrong. And so we had to exclude ourselves from those people. And there's been 10 years, Linnea particularly was demonized and shunned in the women's Bible studies and things like that. But so during the last 10 years, Ventura is a pretty small town, and excuse me, there are people that we used to be in the same congregation with, which they don't talk to us now. And we've sort of informally othered them. I'm seeing it on a continuum. So I want to tell you a real praise. So this has been going on, and Linnea, I haven't got a chance to actually fill you in on this yet, but that 10 years it's been hard in some ways, but of course we've become members of other communities like this wonderful community. So there's this one individual, after about 2 years, he reached out to me, and he and I had actually been in leadership together in 2 different churches. And he's a fine man. And I just couldn't understand why he didn't walk away from that denomination at the same time we did. But I had to let it, you have to let it go. And for about the last 5 or 6 years, we've been getting together every other week. He comes over during COVID and sits on the porch, and we talk every Saturday morning, every other.
Yeah.
Yesterday, he said to me, and part of maintaining, we just love each other.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff we don't argue about or we don't talk about because it's counterproductive and it gets in the way. Yesterday, my friend Howard, he brought up transgender. He brought it up in a sympathetic and empathetic way. Praise God. I was just blown away, Linnea. I was just blown away.
Wow.
So I guess what I'm saying is the whole process you were describing today, I was trying to make it zero sum, Matt, but it isn't. Reconciliation is not a zero sum game.
Yep.
And that just came together by what you said today, and then me bringing in my experience with my friend Howard yesterday. So
exactly. Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I've actually gone through a very similar situation with a church I was previously at also. And we cannot see what's going to happen in the future, and those small little changes in those changes are beautiful. That's what we're here for. That's the beauty, He's like, oh my gosh, praise God, like hallelujah,
And maybe taking that action that in the moment might seem extreme is what nudges somebody else closer to the truth. Some of you may remember a week ago I talked about how I was curious about women who kept going back to an abusive person or string of people, and I was curious about that until I noticed it in myself, that there were organizations that and really the truth of the matter is not only did I feel like obligated to those relationships, but I felt like change would come. I kept, Michael, you're talking about that church. You thought, wow, maybe they'll change. And I have felt like that. And then you come to the point you realize that, change may come someday, but I've got to survive too. So, maybe you all will change after I step away. Clint and Julia have their hand up again. Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to. If anybody has a couple hours today, go to Netflix and watch Pray Away.
Yeah. Thank you.
That movie right there, the anti-gay movement that occurred in the late 70s and the 80s, and that it was a sin, you can pray away gayness and all this. And you know what? It was one of the most heartfelt amends I've seen the church make, or the people directly responsible for that hatred. And you know what? I cried. It was beautiful because you know what? At the end of the day, everybody deserves to be loved. Everybody deserves to be themselves. And you know what? To see a real amends be made, not just say, you know what, we were wrong, but come forward and say, the hurt we caused was unjustified and it was undeserving for these people. They're loved by God, and we had no business doing that.
And the reason that they were causing that pain is like what you said, Matt, because there were gays and lesbians in the gay and lesbian community that felt so much shame that they thought, all of the rest of you gays and lesbians join me and we could pray it away and God will clean it. And, so it was their own people in your own community that are saying, this, you should be ashamed. And, other people have shown us that there's a different way. And that's awful. Just like you said, when it's your own homies, you know?
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole other conversation on internalized self-hatred. So that's a whole different thing.
And non-religious purity codes, where people have to meet certain litmus tests just to be one of the resistors, one of the activists, the protesters. They it's like you check your mind at the door, and so it leaves people out. And I think that's what you're saying about dismantling silos. But it can feel unsafe for the person who has been mistreated. And that's what you were saying, that it's a reaction, a safety reaction to protect yourself from your own, really, from anybody.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to have communion, everybody. This is a conversation that we could really even go deeper with. This is our affirmation of our solidarity with all humanity. When Jesus went to the cross, he exposed the absurdity of human violence in word, in deed, even in thought, that we are not to be violent against anyone, but we are to be hopeful for humanity. And where we can find solidarity, we toast solidarity. That really, in a way, communion is a toast to our solidarity with our species and with all creation. So this is the body and the blood of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Let us eat and drink. And just as we go, Caroline asked Matt if you could kind of